This $2 trillion giant just announced they're using Bitcoin in transactions to avoid sanctions. But is this bullish for Bitcoin? Does this help fight the FUD that Bitcoin is for criminals? We're going to dive into Russia and why the flip-flopping back and forth is extremely bullish for Bitcoin. But first, let's check out this clip from the man, the myth, the legend, Anthony Pompliano, talking about Russia using Bitcoin to avoid sanctions on national television. Let's dive in.
Founder and CEO, and you say he should also be looking at buying as much Bitcoin as possible. Why?
Well, if you think about what he's trying to do here, right, is he's basically looking at strategic reasons to acquire physical property in order to advance the American ideals, ethos, and strategies. Well, what about the digital world? We live in a digital world. And so if you're going to go after the Panama Canal, there's obviously strategic reasons to do that. Greenland as well. Owning Bitcoin is digital real estate. There's only 21 million that will ever exist. We know other countries are mining, buying, holding Bitcoin. And so are we going to let these other countries be the leader, or are we going to be the leader? And I think that's really the decision they have to make.
So let's listen to that, or let's hear that one more time, right? I mean, or go over what Pomp is saying right there, right? We know other countries are buying, mining, and using Bitcoin, even utilizing Bitcoin in foreign transactions. I mean, we had the finance minister of Russia announce the other day that they're using Bitcoin to evade sanctions. Now, why is this extremely bullish? Well, one, it's because it shows the weakness of the dollar. Plain and simple. A lot of people are, I guess, worried about Bitcoin or worried about other currencies being used in foreign transactions to start the use of the petrodollar, right? So Russian companies are using Bitcoin to evade Western sanctions thanks to a new law of the country's finance minister. So let's go over why Axios thinks it matters. The Russian economy has been hampered by the difficulties in making and receiving international payments, even with countries like China that don't use the US dollar. See, this is vital right here. Countries like China that do not use the US dollar, right? So it's already pointing out the benefits of utilizing something like Bitcoin, where if a country is not using the US dollar initially, right, they're going to have to go and create something along the lines or use something along the lines in order to avoid these sanctions if they wanted to, right? So that's the first kind of thing I wanted to highlight real quick as the reserve currencies. But Kremlin last month created an experimental legal framework for cryptocurrency miners, which include the provision where entities can use crypto for international trade. Now, I think that this is absolutely huge because the U.S. tried to play hardball with Russia. They tried to put on a bunch of sanctions in order to almost blackball Russia from not being able to conduct a lot of international trade. Well, here's what Russia's doing. They're like, hey, we're going to basically go against the dollar here and utilize something like Bitcoin in order to conduct this national trade to avoid it, right? So let's revisit this clip from Pomp and hear what else he had to say along the lines of Russia and utilizing Bitcoin for avoiding sanctions.
No, is America is the greatest capital market in the world. And so if America does it, it pretty much reduces all of the career risk, all of the critiques for all these other countries. And so, you know, Russia recently came out and they said, hey, we're mining Bitcoin. We're starting to use it in transactions. People are like, oh, that's Russia. You know, we kind of don't like them. And so they're kind of in the corner. People look at El Salvador and they're like, oh, that's El Salvador. I couldn't point it out on a map.
But if they're doing it, it makes more of a case if your enemies are doing it that you should be.
Well, look, the United States took a pretty drastic action in terms of the sanctions that they went after individuals, country, and also took some of the Russian assets and said, hey, we're going to give to the Ukrainian people. When that happened, Bitcoiners came out and they said, you are actually going to further accelerate the demise of the U.S. dollar because now you have introduced this sanctions risk. There was a paper that came out of the Harvard Economics Department where they talked about, will countries now start to buy Bitcoin, not for price, not for the sovereignty, but actually as a sanctions hedge?
Russia.
And so Russia is actually doing that.
See, so that's an interesting point right there, right? So our nation's going to start buying Bitcoin as a sanctions hedge, right? If the U.S. is trying to play hardball with people, they're trying to say, hey, you cannot trade with Russia. You cannot trade with whoever because we're not going to do business with you. Now, to avoid those sanctions, are countries going to start using Bitcoin? Are countries going to start buying up Bitcoin to avoid sanctions to backhand the United States? Well, if the United States starts trying to swing its way around, try to be the alpha at the table, it seems like that's the case. I would not be surprised if we see more of these countries start to do this to avoid sanctions and utilize Bitcoin as a sanctions hedge, as Pomp so eloquently lined out there, right? So, I mean, we're seeing it now with Russia. Russia's the first one, right? Where they're using crypto and Bitcoin to avoid sanctions, right? So, cryptocurrencies are not backed by central banks and they're used to trade outside of international banking system, right? So that's a major advantage here where they're not going to be needed in order to conduct this trade, right? So transactions, individuals' accounts or wallets are encrypted and they're validated by a decentralized network of users rather than the financial intermediaries. So it's lining out a major use case here to avoid sanctions, right? The first major use case of Bitcoin was the Silk Road, right? Plain and simple. We had people trying to avoid using the banking system to buy basically anything and everything off the internet. Well, now we've got that, but on the flip side of things, we've got that for international trade, international sanctions. So I think that this is extremely interesting and bullish because we've had Russia, basically flip-flop back and forth on a few different things here where they've, is Trump embracing Bitcoin almost going to be a positive for Bitcoin and for Russia to utilize Bitcoin to evade sanctions? Because Putin knows that if Trump utilizes Bitcoin in a strategic reserve, they cannot be harsh against Bitcoin, right? They're going to actually embrace it. So the pricing of Bitcoin is going to be more stable because, previously, the volatility might have scared somebody. You can use Bitcoin and you can see that value drop 10% in a day. So the trade isn't necessarily useful. But ladies and gentlemen, if the US says, hey, we're going to buy 1 million Bitcoin, which they've already kind of come out and said that if this is the proposal for the Bitcoin strategic reserve, if the United States goes and buys 1 million Bitcoin, which would be 200,000 a year over 5 years period, they would have to hold for 20 years. That means that volatility is going to go down. It'll become more stable. The thing that's volatile about Bitcoin is not Bitcoin, right? It is the US dollar exchange rate because we know how much Bitcoin is going to be mined every single day, folks. Let me repeat that. We know how much Bitcoin is going to be put into circulation every single day. What we don't know is the global liquidity because that's, essentially manipulated by people. That's manipulated by humans. And so I think people are starting to notice that the potential of utilizing Bitcoin could be very big, right? And especially the embracement of President Trump can help basically these other nations start to get more bullish on Bitcoin. So why accumulation in reserves in dollars if they can be lost so easily? Putin has asked that question, right? So the Russian government has been a historic opponent of Bitcoin, banning its use for domestic payments, but recently has come to the potential benefits of using these currencies to avoid sanctions. So they discussed it on Russian TV whether Bitcoin and other digital assets can be used to evade U.S. sanctions. He said that these methods need to be developed and expanded, and that he expects them to come within the next year. So Putin and the finance minister are saying, hey, look at me over here. We're going to be using Bitcoin to evade these sanctions. So the U.S. better not put it on there if they want us to utilize the dollar. Now, I think that's a very important aspect. But these comments will give more fodder for many in Washington, D.C., who see crypto as a threat to U.S. national security and law enforcement's ability to stop money laundering and other illicit activity. See, they're already lining it up for you, folks. They're already kind of putting it out there, right? Russia's going to be using Bitcoin to avoid sanctions. Bitcoin's used for criminals. They're already putting out this FUD that we've been hearing for quite some time, right? It's plain and simple. Reduce, reuse, repeat. All of this FUD, the 3 R's. It's like it's the recycling little symbol here in the United States. They're going to keep using the same FUD over and over and over again. But hey, Bitcoin cannot be stopped. Bitcoin does not care. All right, let's keep diving in here. So experts say, however, that Russia's experiments with crypto cross-border payments are more of a sign of the effectiveness of sanctions on the traditional dollar-based currency system, and that cryptocurrencies cannot be used at large scale. Yeah, okay. That's interesting, right? They're already trying to line it out here. That, hey, Bitcoin cannot be used as large scale. Well, obviously it can, right? You can send large transactions across borders instantly in finality with low fees. So I think that this is just the start where, you know, they're going to be utilizing Bitcoin for avoidance of sanctions and avoidance of a lot of other things here, right? So, but, you know, I think the one big thing to take away from all this is that the banking system is going to raise a bunch of flags about this, right? So they've already said local banks are extremely cautious with Russian-related transactions to avoid scrutiny, right? So banks already do not want to work with Russia because of these sanctions that the United States put on them. So, all right, if banks don't want to work with us, let's take our money and let's get out of here, right? So, you know, this is a great comment here from Frank from upstate New York, that this is why the U.S. will have trouble passing the S4912 bill. The people in power will leverage time and let Russia and China lead, then be forced in with the Russian Treasury Reserve. By then, state are adopting Bitcoin already. So in the long run, the U.S. will pressure itself. Hey, I agree with you 100%, man. I think as I was lining out here earlier that, you know, with the strategic reserve, it's almost like, hey, they're opening up the floodgates here where everybody and their mother is going to be utilizing Bitcoin. Now, are they going to be using it for things like avoiding sanctions? Well, it's a free and open market now, right? I mean, that's the benefit and also the negative of the free and open market is the U.S. doesn't have control. I take that as a positive, but hey, like, you know, if you're the US and you're trying to strong arm some countries like Russia, you might see that as a negative, right? So, I mean, I see the free and open market as a positive, excuse me. So this year, Russia has already permitted the use of cryptocurrencies in foreign trade and has taken steps to make it legal to mine cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin. So I think that this is interesting too, because not too long ago, Russia put out this where the U.S. put out this, about Russia potentially avoiding sanctions with the use of cryptocurrency. So they did this 2 years ago, right? The U.S. really just lined all this out a couple years ago here, and look at this date, May 4th, 2002. Or 2022, excuse me, not that long ago, right? Bitcoin came out in 2000. The first Genesis block was in 2009, right? So not 2002, but 2009. But yeah, anyway, 2022. So cryptocurrencies are created and exchanged through yada, yada, yada. But essentially, you know, there's some mixers, tumbling services. That's why we've seen the attack on those, the chain hopping, where North Korea has done this. So there's other places that have been utilizing Bitcoin and other cryptos in order to avoid sanctions previously. And the U.S. has known about it, right? The U.S. has known about it, but instead they've chosen basically to embrace Bitcoin. And why is this positive for Bitcoin? It's basically because the U.S. is admitting here that Bitcoin cannot be stopped, right, folks? it's plain and simple. Like, you just have to figure out a Bitcoin strategy, or else you're not going to be able to, figure it out here. So I'll pull up Jamie here, where it's my buddy Jim from Cascader. Great. It's great. I use it instead of Google now, but basically, it gives a great overview of what is going on, right? So in the wake of this economic sanctions, due to the invasion of Ukraine, Russia has explored the potential of using cryptocurrency, particular Bitcoin, to circumvent these restrictions and continue international trade. See, this is where I'm not sure if I agree 100%, where the strategy remains highly debated among experts, right? So this is an important thing to highlight here, where it's been legitimized as an asset class, although the widespread adoptions can potentially spark further sanctions. So the U.S. has highlighted the potential risks of this approach, as I showed you guys there earlier. And so if we look at this, one of the articles that good old Jamie gave us, where, it's this introduction of this bill and reverses a 2020 Russian law, which legalized cryptocurrencies, yet prevented the use for payments and goods. So I think this is very bullish for Bitcoin, as Russia is seeing the benefits of Bitcoin as a potential peer-to-peer payment system, right? I mean, plain and simple. Banks are worried about doing business with Russia, and a lot of people are worried about the potentials of that because Russia is being put under a lot of fire for these sanctions that the U.S. is placing on them, right? So even with this volatility, a lot of volatility that we're seeing here recently, where Bitcoin crashing down to 91,000, right? We're having a little bit of a red day here, down almost 6% in this past month. Crazy volatility here, folks. Obviously, I'm saying that all tongue in cheek. But we have Bitcoin just kind of crashing down to nearly 92,000, just under that, and 91.8. If you were to tell me a couple years ago, or even a few months ago, that we're crashing to 91,000, I would have been like, all right, sign me up, right? So I think at this point in time, people are seeing that the volatility is there still, but it's there to the upside. And with the US and other countries starting to buy up Bitcoin, that's going to continue to make things very more stable, essentially. Bitcoin's never going to be a stable coin, folks. Let's be obvious about that, right? So, we saw Tether buy up a lot more Bitcoin, and maybe I'll do another live stream about that tomorrow on how that is bullish for US bonds and everything else. But the benefit of the US and other governments and businesses and other things like that buying up Bitcoin is that they're not going to be as paper hands as maybe some retail, maybe as traditional finance, because they're going to be scooping up. So it's not going to corrupt the Bitcoin system as, a lot of the other fiat industries have corrupted it, right? So there are a lot of industries that have been corrupted by Bitcoin and by the fiat system and other things. And one of those, I think, is the health insurance industry. I'm traveling here. If you can hear me, I got a little bit of the sniffles, folks. So when I go to the doctor, I'm not going to need health insurance, because I'm going to go through Crowd Health. They're a great place where I can find doctors, negotiate my bill. So I'll get it for pretty cheap. I'll fund those bills through their peer-to-peer funding platform if I need some help. They've got great funding success, nearly 100%. They've helped paid over $10 million worth of medical expenses and saved over $25 million in medical costs. So, it's just overall a great place to join a group of like-minded individuals who are really just trying to avoid negotiating these bills. Did I hit my deductible by the end of this year? Is it a good time for me to go to the doctor? Even though I'm sick, I might try to avoid it because of the potential expenses. Well, if you sign up through Crowd Health, you can use promo code Green Candle, and you can get all that for $99 for your first 3 months, save you some Skrilla Manila, and join the great program that is Crowd Health. If you go to joincrowdhealth.com, it's a great way to do it. It's a great way to, go back and really take control of your health here, right? So Bitcoin is a great way to take control of your money. The way that I see that you should do that is by, really going through and, practicing self-custody. Now, self-custody can be something that is very intimidating, but folks, you can go to thebitcoinway.com/green candle, and I'll give you a 30-minute consultation with the boys over at Bitcoin Way. They can help you get your Bitcoin off an exchange, set it up extremely easily. They've got people literally working around the clock. You can go any time of the day. Look at this, folks. We got it from 12 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Just on that single day, right? We've got everybody working around the clock to help you get your Bitcoin off exchange, help make sure that everything is safe, protect you from cyber attacks. And if you're looking to get a Plan B passport, I'm going to Colombia here, folks. That's why I'm coming to you live from a hotel room here. I'm going down there for Bitcoin Medellin. So, you can definitely utilize Bitcoin or utilize the Bitcoin Way to get a Plan B passport if that's something that you are interested in. And yeah, I think it's overall a great service. So if this is your first time here, appreciate you guys coming out. Smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, comment on it, tell a friend to tell a friend, and I will see you guys all at the next one. And I'll be in Colombia as well. So if you guys are out there, come holla at your boy, and let's grab a drink, a beer, coffee, whatever. And looking forward to it. See you guys all at the next one.